What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the MBT movement. I'm your host, Sheldon, and on today's episode, really excited to bring this one to you. We are diving right back into breath with part 2 of the breath blueprint. So last week, we dug into the science stating 91% of athletes are breathing wrong. Also, how we lose our natural breathing pattern by the age of 5. That is pretty mind-blowing. And why your diaphragm is the pneumatic hub of your entire body. Some solid research brought to you by Dr. Belisa Vranich. So if you missed part 1, definitely go back and listen. It's going to set the foundation for everything we covered. So today we're getting into the solutions. I'm going to break down the world's most powerful breathing philosophies, from ancient practices that are dated over 5,000 years old to modern tactical breathing used by Navy SEALs and Special Forces, all the way down to therapeutic modalities that can unlock deep emotional healing. And then I'll show you exactly how I integrate all of this into the MBT approach. So let's get into it. So let's start where it all began. Everything we're going to talk about today, Vranich, McKeown, Nestor, the Navy SEALs, these are all modern interpretations of breathwork. But the original breath masters, they were practicing over 5,000 years ago in ancient India with a practice known as pranayama. Now, the word itself comes from Sanskrit, where prana means life force or vital energy, and ayama meaning to extend or control. So literally, the definition of pranayama means the extension and control of life force through breath. Pranayama was first documented in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which was around 400 BCE, and practices even date back to Vedic texts, where earlier oral traditions have dated to be around 1500 to 1200 BCE. In modern day, pranayama is known as the fourth limb of an 8-limbed yoga path, where ancient yogis understood this as controlling the breath to control the mind to control the body. Modern science is able to validate a lot more than back in the day. Things like heart rate variability improvements, parasympathetic nervous system activation, reduced cortisol and stress hormones through things like blood work, and these sort of physiological biomarkers. But this took 5,000 years of practice, and now it's backed by peer-reviewed research. There are dozens of pranayama techniques, but let me hit the essential ones, the main ones that show up in modern methods. These are techniques that contemporary teachers have built upon since. Now I'm going to go over 4 of the modern techniques that you might be familiar with. The first one is known as Nadi Shodana. This is alternate nostril breathing. The second is known as Kapalabati, which is a skull shining breath. The third is known as an Ujjayi breath, which is the ocean breath. And the last is Sama Vritti, which is the equal breathing technique. The first technique, Nadi Shodana, alternate nostril breathing, it literally is that. So you're going to breathe in through your nose and out through your nose. You want to alternate the inhales and exhales with the nostril. So when you inhale, you're going to block off the right nostril. You're going to take a breath in, so you're breathing in through your left nostril. Then you're going to switch nostrils, and then you're going to be exhaling through your right nostril. And then you're going to inhale, holding that same nostril. So you're going to be inhaling through your right nostril, and then you're going to exhale, switching nostrils, and then you're going to exhale and exhale through the left. So if you're watching the video version, this is exclusive to the school community. So if you're not already on the school community, go ahead and check it out. But you'll see the video version. I'm going to demonstrate this real quick. So I'm going to take a big breath in. I'm holding my right nose plugged. I'm going to breathe in through my left. I'm going to pause. I'm going to switch nostrils. Now I'm plugging my left nostril, and I'm exhaling through my right. And then I'm going to inhale through my right. Switch nostrils, exhale through my left. So that's going to be the alternate nostril breathing, otherwise known as Nadi Shodana. The benefits here are that you're getting access to both the left and right hemisphere of the brain. Not just that, it's calming, it's centering. And there's actually some solid research talking about the differences between the right and left nostrils. So when you breathe in through the right nostril, it's been linked to have more sympathetic nervous system activation. So that is your fight, flight, freeze. And your left nostril is more down regulation. This is linked to your parasympathetic nervous system. That is your rest, digest, relaxation phase of your nervous system. So pretty good science, pretty interesting benefits behind this technique alone. Moving on to the next technique, this is known as Kapalabati. This is a skull shining breathing. So you're going to have rapid, forceful exhales through the nose with passive inhales. So if you've ever been in a yoga class, this is known as breath of fire. So you're taking a breath in passively. You're basically allowing the diaphragm to recoil. and then you're forcing the exhale out. So when you force the exhale out, you're going to have a vacuum. You're going to have a recoil of the diaphragm to pull air back in. That is going to be your inhale, and you just continue to force those exhales out. So as much as it sounds like all you're doing is exhaling, the inhale's very light and passive. You are still getting air in. It is a very rhythmic style tempo. So it's very fast. So very forceful exhales and the recoil of the diaphragm, again, coming in for the inhale. Moving into Ujjayi breath, this is a slight constriction of the back of the throat, creating an ocean wave sort of sound. This is very common in Ashtanga and Vinyasa yoga practices. So as you inhale, you're going to inhale through the nose, and then you're going to sort of like use the back of your tongue and close off the glottis of your throat, so the back of your throat, and just really let the exhale come out. So I'm going to inhale, then I'm going to restrict my throat. So it's very much in that sort of way where you're controlling the exhale. Sort of like I talked about in episode 1, how humming is sort of a technique that can be beneficial to 1, building carbon dioxide tolerance, 2, increasing vagal tone, because the restriction of your throat along with the vibration of your vocal cords helps to stimulate parasympathetic activation through vagus nerve stimulation of the vibration of the vocal cords. In addition to that, this Ujjayi breath is very much a way for you to control the exhale, control the tempo at which you expel air, which again is going to help to build CO2 tolerance. Last, we have Sama Vritti. This is equal breathing. Many people know this most commonly as box style breathing. So you have 4 corners to the box. One corner is going to be one number, you're going to have a pause, you're going to have an exhale, and then you're going to have a pause, and that's the carve of the box. You can do it box style method, or you can do it with just a normal inhale and exhale. The main important thing here is to make sure that you're doing equal breathing throughout the whole technique. So it's not like a 4-second inhale, 8-second exhale. That would be a different style of breathing technique. This is mainly for equalizing the breath. This is very similar to James Nestor's perfect breath, where he has a 5-second box style technique. So it's 5-second inhale, 5 pause, 5 exhale, 5 pause. The main thing here is you want to make sure that you have breath symmetry in each direction. That should be equivalent to the inhale or the exhale, which again, those are both going to be symmetrical. Now we're going to move into our next philosophy here, covering Dr. Belisa Vranich's book. She literally covered the work and wrote a book on breathing for performance titled Breathing for Warriors. Her Breathing for Warriors approach is built on 7 principles from Vladimir Vasilyev's Russian Systema, but her core message is this: horizontal breathing is ideal, not vertical breathing. Your diaphragm should be driving the bus, not your shoulders and neck. But within Dr. Vranich's book, she covers 3 main concepts that are of ideal breathing techniques. The first is known as the location of movement. Very straightforward. Where are you breathing, and what is the first thing that's moving when you inhale, when you take that breath in? Is it your belly, or is it your chest and shoulders? This is going to dictate that location of movement, and that's all we're paying attention to. The second principle here is known as range of motion. Range of motion is something we're very familiar in the orthopedic world when we talk about joints, but regarding breath, range of motion is going to dictate how much air you can take in on the inhale. And the last concept here is known as the BIC score, or the breathing IQ score. And this is her proprietary assessment tool, which dictates breathing efficiency. Within any targeted breathing model, there's going to be 3 main concepts here. The first is going to be before exertion, the second is going to be during, and the last piece is going to be after, post, or recovery. Before exertion, really the whole idea here is you want to prepare the system to be oxygenated. In addition to that, you're also getting the nervous system prepped for the work ahead. Very much like if you hit a workout, you want to have a dynamic warm-up. That way the body and the nervous system are both synced up so that you're able to optimize the work within that session. Next is going to be during the effort. The idea here is you want the systems to be working in unison. So a coordinated breath with movement. In something like a squat or something like a reach, whenever there's a lengthening phase or the lever arm is increasing, you want to take the breath in. Reason being is you need more stability, and what better way to create stability than through the breath? The breath is going to utilize the diaphragm to create trunk and circumferential stability. And in addition to that, you can coordinate and better connect kinetic chains, being the upper body and the lower body. So this is the idea here, is you really want to focus integrating the breath with the movement, which is the whole point of prepping the nervous system, which is what we do before exertion, so that everything's synced up. And then during work, everything's paired up and coordinated. Moving into recovery, this is sort of post-work, post-session. The whole idea here now is to down-regulate the nervous system. Maybe we're a little ramped up, we're sympathetic, we're active, ready to go like Russell Crowe. But now we want to focus on down-regulating the nervous system. In addition to that, we want to focus on lymphatics and being able to clear metabolic waste. If waste is staying in the space, we're stifling recovery. This is essentially like a traffic jam. When we induce voluntary trauma through something like a very rigorous workout, we create muscle tearing, and we need tissue to recover, and we need to optimize and facilitate recovery. Now, moving to the next philosophy here, we're going to go over Patrick McKeown's work with the oxygen advantage. Patrick McKeown takes a more clinical and measurable approach, which is something that I appreciate. He has a very fascinating background because he used to work in the corporate world, but his life entirely changed when he met Dr. Konstantin Buteyko. And if you don't already know Dr. Buteyko, he was a brilliant Russian physician who conducted groundbreaking research to determine the optimal breathing for astronauts during the Soviet space race. And Patrick was able to shadow during this whole time to pick up the methodologies and the strategies, really understanding the research behind the physiology of the breath. So I'm a huge fan of what Patrick is doing here, but he incorporates what's known as a BOLT score, which is known as the body oxygen level test. This is something we talked about in part 1, and that is his proprietary creation, so I definitely want to give him credit there. Within the oxygen advantage, he focuses on 3 things: nasal breathing at all times, including during exercise, increasing carbon dioxide tolerance, and stimulating altitude through breath holds. I've talked about this as well within various bodies of research conducted by the Karolinska Institute, found that you can have increased oxygenation of up to 18% just by breathing through the nose. You'll have increased nitric oxide uptake upwards of 15 to 20 times if you just breathe through the nose. Benefits of nitric oxide include increased circulation via vasodilation. Through that, you have decreased blood pressure. And not just that, nitric oxide is an antimicrobial, so you can have immune system benefits simply by just breathing through your nose. When I first got into supplements, I thought nitric oxide was this magic pill. I was like, oh my God, there's this new thing out, nitric oxide. It's in supplements. It helps get you more circulation. It helps give you more energy. Lo and behold, we have that naturally within our own physiology. We just have to know how to access it. And something like nasal breathing is a huge benefit to this naturally ingrained molecule. The second being carbon dioxide tolerance. So the key here is breath holds and reduced breathing. This is something I was able to play around on a hike earlier today, but the idea here is you want to be in control of your breath, breathing in through the nose, breathing out through a nice relaxed exhale, whether it's through pressed lips or whether it's through your nose. And at the very end of the exhale, you don't want to gasp for air, nor do you want to mouth breathe. You want to really control the breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, really controlling, relaxing. And if you can even have a breath hold at the end of the exhale, that's where you really start to build the carbon dioxide tolerance. Something I was able to experience anecdotally was I realized during the hike, during the ascent, is that I was getting fatigued. Obviously, is going to be more fatiguing than going down. But as I was getting fatigued, I was focusing on nasal breathing. I was focused on staying in control of my breath. And if there was ever a point where I got overexerted and fatigued to a point where my breath started to get rapidly more increased, I would just simply take a break. Now, this made the hike a lot longer than it needed to be. But this methodology alone, I noticed that after about 5 or 6 times of stopping, that I was able to go longer. The physiology coming into play here is the increase in nitric oxide created a vasodilatory effect where my vessels were able to open up more. I was able to have increased circulation, increased tissue perfusion, and just more enhanced benefits in terms of recovery and physiology. So I encourage next time you're exercising or trying something a little bit more physically exerting, definitely play around with this. Utilize the nasal breathing during the exercise and let the breath dictate how much you can load. If your breath starts getting out of control, you're doing way too much and you need to take a breather, literally get back in control of the breath. And once the breath comes back into play, you continue training at whatever load you were left off at. I would be interested to see if you hit that 2-minute threshold, where 2 minutes is typically the standard to optimize phosphocreatine or PCR stores, which is exactly why during a training regimen, you might see The ones who are implementing rest periods anywhere between a minute, minute and a half, upwards of 2 minutes for maximal recovery. But based off of that, the last piece here that Patrick McKeown goes into within his 3 pillars is altitude simulation. And this is essentially intermittent hypoxic or hypercapnic training. In essence, what you're doing here is you're doing a breath hold while you're training. So something like a sprint, you're going to be holding your breath during the duration of the sprint and then maintaining control of the breath even post-sprint. This is going to have very similar carryover effects, such as if you were doing altitude training, where we already know at altitude, the air is going to be a lot thinner because there's decreased pressure. But real quick, going back into Dr. Konstantin Buteko's method, again, he was a Soviet physician during the 1950s Soviet space race era, and he's been able to link chronic hyperventilation to asthma, anxiety, and sleep disorder. And if you think about anxiety, a big one here, panic attacks, anxiety, what's happening here? Hyperventilation. So there's going to be rapid, shallow breathing, and this simply means that we're not retaining carbon dioxide because we're constantly holding on to the oxygen. Again, the whole concept here is as you exhale and you build carbon dioxide tolerance, when you hold your breath, you're actually allowing oxygen to perfuse the tissues, which is a big piece, especially with regards to performance and recovery. Interestingly enough, utilizing this method, Dr. Buteyko also was able to conduct a randomized control trial supporting the methodology for its effectiveness on asthma. Now, the next philosophy here revolves around James Nestor's body of work and his book, Breath, the Science of a Lost Art. James Nestor's contribution is sort of unorthodox. He's traditionally an investigative journalist, and he was able to travel the world around ancient burial sites, secret Soviet facilities, and choir schools to understand how we lost the art of breathing. And his big takeaways were our skulls have actually gotten narrower over the past few hundred years due to processed foods, less chewing, which obstructs our airways. If you look at ancient Paleolithic skulls, you'll notice that there is a wider dental arch. The faces are more forward and there's more of an open airway. Main piece here are the limitations of technology ancient civilizations had. So how they had to cook their food, how they had to hunt, how they had to gather, how they had to masticate their foods and really chew their foods because either they're eating close to raw meat, or just food that's going to be a lot more tougher and utilizes the jaw to a lot more higher level function. Whereas now in this day and era, we have the benefits of technological evolution and convenience, which we're able to make foods that are a little bit more easier to digest, easier to masticate, where we don't have to chew as much. In addition to that, the society we live in is very high-strung, very anxiety-ridden, and very focused on quick and go, right? What's quick, what's easy, what's convenient, how can we get it done faster, optimize, where that's not what's ingrained in our DNA. So because of this, we've essentially atrophied our face, our dental arch, and quite often I think of the saying that goes, you don't rise to the level of your expectations, you fall to the level of your training. And that's essentially what we've come down to is because we have convenience, because we have things like technology, because we have things like desk jockeying and working from home, we have regressed to this level of capacity. So in order to maintain these systems, we have to ensure that we maintain a level of training and readiness through things like physical training, through breath work, through the choice of nutritious whole foods that keep us balanced. Now, in addition to this, James Nestor also created what's known as the perfect breath, where he calls this breath coherence. It's a 5.5 second breath. So 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out. That is around roughly 5.5 breaths per minute. And really, you want to be in that sweet spot of 5 to 6 breaths per minute. So this is Mr. Nestor's interpretation of what an ideal breath looks like. Now, the next philosophy here is going to be through Dan Brulé's body of work, and he wrote a book known as Just Breathe. Dan Brulé is what you'd call a breath master himself. He has 50 plus years in breathwork, trained as a Navy medical deep sea diver at Cambridge, and he's trained Navy SEALs, champion martial artists, Tony Robbins, and his book Just Breathe is about more than performance. It's about using breath as a tool for emotional regulation, stress resiliency, and even spiritual awakening. Dan Brulé created his model known as the Convergences model, which are 3 principles here. The first being awareness, the second relaxation, and the third is integration. Now, the first concept is known as awareness, and this is a big piece that even I practice within the MBT philosophy. Whenever I teach someone how to move, whether it's a rehab strategy, whether it's something they have going on with their body, the first thing I want them to understand is to bring awareness to creating that correction. So for something like posture, I'll just show someone what good posture should be for them. This is all relative. So maybe they're slouched forward, so I'll have them sit a little bit more upright. I'll have them engage their shoulders a bit more. Maybe I'll use kinesio tape to give them the biofeedback so they can feel when the tape pulls on their skin, and when the tape pulls on their skin, that is essentially them getting out of position or out of the ideal posture. So the kinesio tape is a nice piece of biofeedback as well. But all I'm doing here is I'm just trying to pattern awareness, because the more aware you can become of whether it's a postural thing, whether it's a breath thing, whatever the case might be, the more aware you can become of what the ideal should be. Now we're changing the physiology, we're changing the psychology, and we're basically ingraining a new movement pattern and habit. This is the biggest piece here, because as soon as you become aware of it, you might slap yourself on the shoulder and say, "Oh gosh, I'm out of perfect posture now. Why can I ever get this?" But give yourself some credit, because now you're becoming aware of what bad posture means and what it feels like. Whereas before, maybe you were living life and you didn't know you were doing it until all of a sudden you started to feel a weird pain, and then you came into my office or a PT's office, and they gave you this strategy to make that correction. So the first piece is awareness. Through the awareness, you build good habits and you become more and more aware of it, to where now it becomes like second nature. This is the exact strategy I utilize when I'm working with clients one-to-one, but I would agree with Dan Brulé here that awareness is a big first step into creating the new movement pattern or habit or whatever the case might be. Now, the second piece here in Brulé's work is known as relaxation. The idea here is that you want to release any unnecessary muscle tension. This is in alignment with the Russian Special Forces model known as Systema, where relaxation is one of 4 pillars within their program. Now, back to Brulé's work, he talks about relaxation from the standpoint of relaxing any unnecessary muscle tension. You think of it like a building of guide wires. Each wire should have its respective amount of tension. If one wire is pulling too much or not enough, it's going to throw the whole system off. In that same sort of nature, relaxation is just that, is you want everything working that needs to be working, nothing more, nothing less, right? And in doing that, you can optimize performance, streamline efficiency, and everything is going to be doing what it needs to. And the last piece here is integration, combining powerful breathing with deep relaxation consciously. And this goes back to the awareness model that I was talking about, is you create awareness, you ingrain those movement patterns, you become aware of what ideal should be. And when it comes to the ideal, it's going to incorporate some components of relaxation. In addition to that, there's going to be a certain level of bracing, sure, but the strategy here is optimizing where you should be, keeping everything in place, no stone left unturned, and the systems that need to be working are doing what they need to. Nothing more, nothing less. You are performing at a 10.0 version of what you should be doing. And that is essentially the system of integration, is now you've learned it, you have these new movement patterns, and you're practicing this 24/7. Based off of Brulé's work, the whole goal state here is an energized calm, is you want to be alert but not anxious. You want to be calm, but not sluggish. And you want to be in a state of what Brulé calls dynamic peace. You can make the changes and respond based off of your environment, based off of what you're feeling, based off of your mindset, based off of all these different factors. But at the same time, it's almost like you're surrendering. You're letting it be. You're letting it do what it needs to be. And you're just optimizing it based off of the environment. This is integrative of the biopsychosocial model. So your biology based off of what your physiology needs, your psychology based off of your mindset, maybe a spiritual or faith-based practice, and the social aspect, that is your environment. What is your surroundings? What is your external stimuli? Keeping all of that in a state of what's known as homeostasis, so that you can be, again, to what Brulé refers to as the state of dynamic peace. Now, the unique thing to Brulé's body of work is that he's one of the first people to really bridge the gap between both performance and spirituality. He uses breath as a tool for emotional regulation and peak performance. So this is like the integration of both Patrick McKeown's work and the Yoga Sutra practices. Moving into the next philosophy here, we're going to be talking about the Russian martial arts discipline known as Systema. Now we get to the source that influenced many of these modern teachers, to include Dr. Vranich. Systema is a Russian martial art developed for their special operator forces, at the time known as the Soviet Spetsnaz. Now, Vladimir Vasiliev, who trained under Mikhail Ryabko, brought these methods to the West. At its core, Systema is built on 4 pillars: breath, movement, posture, and relaxation. So going a bit deeper, we're going to talk about these 4 pillars now, where the first pillar is breath. Breath is the foundation of everything, and it's continuous and it's never under stress, right? We're never tensing, we're never hyperventilating, we're not hypoventilating, but we're always in control of the breath because that is the foundation which everything is set up. The next pillar here is movement, where a movement should be natural, efficient, and without any necessary tension, very much like the breath, fluid, moving like water. The third pillar here is posture, where posture is regarded to as alignment, which allows for optimal breathing and movement. And if you think about it, if I have a slouched forward posture, now I'm basically compressing and constricting my lungs, so I can't optimize my breathing. If I can't optimize my breathing, my movement is going to be dysfunctional. So posture is very much sort of like Brulé's body of work, where he refers to his convergence model, where it's awareness, relaxation, and integration. In the 4 pillars of Systema, it's breath, movement, posture, and relaxation. And this comes all together in a way where it's now packaged and integrated in this own model. So breath is first, and it's going to enable the entire system to work fluidly. And what I love about Systema is how they break breathing into specific principles. These aren't just techniques, they're ways of training your nervous system to respond differently under stress. Now, within Systema's core breathing principles, there are 5 main concepts that I wanted to go over: breath independence, breath continuity, burst breathing, breath holding, and slow breathing. Starting off from the very top, breath independence specifically refers to the breath becoming irrelevant whether you're breathing in or out. It's somewhere in between where you're consciously aware of your breath, but you're not consciously in control of the breath. It's essentially like Dan Brulé's work where he says, let the breath breathe you, is the idea here. At first, it feels completely wrong and uncomfortable, but once you understand this concept, it's going to relate to remapping the neurology that has multiple benefits, especially for situations where attacks can be sudden, surprising, or unexpected. This is referring to the Russian martial arts system, Systema. So something like a push-up, where you can integrate this is you're going to breathe out on the way down and in on the way up for 5 to 10 reps. And then you're going to reverse it. You're going to breathe in on the way down and out on the way up. Finally, you're going to empty your lungs and do 5 to 10 push-ups on a breath hold. Where the primary goal here is you want to realize your breath becomes independent of your actions. It doesn't matter what you're doing, you're always breathing, but the main component here is the relaxation factor, because it's easy to do this and not be aware of your breath, but is there anywhere you're holding tension in your breath? And this is the main concept that we want to be aware of: the relaxation, the posture, but again, the foundation always comes down to the breath. Breath continuity is just that. All you're doing is linking the breaths together without having to consciously control or think about it. So it's uninterrupted breathing, and you want to make sure you're utilizing that full inhalation and full exhalation phase. The change happens from in-breath to out-breath, and it should be natural without pause. And the main insights here are that our emotions, sudden fear, surprise, or shock, these are all emotions that are going to block our breath. And this is basically tension with bad side effects. So if you have tension, you're not relaxed. Again, this goes against the Systema model. The rule here is if you can do nothing else, you can always just breathe out. And breathing out is movement and thus life. The second pillar of Systema here is movement. So breath, movement, posture, and relaxation are all integrative through this process. So here's a powerful example from the book itself. Imagine you're surprised with a plastic bag over your head. The untrained response is to panic and try to breathe in, but you get no air in, only plastic, and your body goes into proper panic. The Systema response, on the other hand, is breathe out first. This allows you to move, potentially disrupt the attacker, and puts you in a counter-offensive position. Same threat, completely different outcome, all based on breath. The third concept here is known as burst breathing, and this is going to be a breath technique that is used under excessive tension, fear, or strain. Essentially, what you want to do is you want to inhale sharply through the nose and exhale forcefully through the mouth in succession. So it's almost like a hyperventilation, but really you're utilizing full range of motion of the breath. And again, the whole benefits here come down to a physiological and a psychological level. From a psychological standpoint, burst breathing is a pattern interrupter. It takes specific psychological focus away from the immediate problem, and it frees up physical resources to actually deal with it. On a physical level, it permits you to continue to oxygenate your body and your systems. If you panic and hold your breath, you compound your problems as autonomous systems begin to sound the emergency alarm. So the main thing here is continuous breath, the flow of the breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, through rapid, forceful succession. Combined, it disrupts both the psychological and physical paths that lead to the vicious cycle of panic, tension, and more panic. This is like a panic tension cycle, a rendition of something we know in orthopedics as the pain spasm cycle. The last concept here is breath holding, which is going to be very much in alignment with Patrick McKeown's work with the oxygen advantage. And this is one of the most powerful training methods in Systema. It's one that I've personally found transformative, and I can relate it to, again, McKeown's work with building carbon dioxide tolerance. But here's what the book of Systema says about it. Breath holding exercises are the closest thing to replicating psychology developed through brutal training methods without the accompanying injuries. You have a few valid benefits here as well. From a psychological strengthening standpoint, this is where elite military units were psychologically prepared through brutal training, where breath holding gives similar psychological resiliency without broken bones or permanent injury. The second is clearing erroneous psychology. A regular breath holding practice clears out erroneous concepts of self-identity, those deep-seated patterns of fear and avoidance. And the last are physical benefits, where you have improved ability of the body to use available oxygen, improved circulatory effects, and an overall more robust and efficient vascular system. This whole system was out before Patrick McKeown wrote The Oxygen Advantage. There are going to definitely be overlapping concepts here. And if you look, these are almost one and the same, where the main benefit here is you're increasing oxygen perfusion to tissue and you're building your carbon dioxide tolerance. Another quote from the Systema book that I wanted to share here is that correct breathing is the difference between the ability to continue exerting energy for an indefinite period and total exhaustion. So breath control is key here, and other programs like the Oxygen Advantage are great regimens and programs that we can integrate to increase performance and recovery. The last concept within the Systema discipline is slow breathing. So the idea here is you want to perform a slow exercise whilst continuing to breathe in or out, done in a progressive, symmetrical fashion. An example of a push-up would be where you breathe in on the way up and count to 1 on the way down. And for the next rep, you would breathe in on the way up and count 2 on the way down. You would do this all the way down until you reach 10 and then reverse the process back down. This is going to promote fluidity of motion, relaxation, and create brain maps of neutral emotionality. Now, what makes Systema breathing unique is its continuous breath. Never holding your breath under stress, never creating tension. And when an untrained person faces a danger, they typically either hold their breath or hyperventilate. This spikes cortisol, tenses muscles, creates a spastic diaphragm, and restricts movement. Now, Systema teaches the opposite, where at the first sign of stress, you want to focus on breathing, which is why breath is going to be the first pillar within this discipline. So the method in itself is you want to inhale through your nose to activate relaxation, exhale through the mouth to release tension, matching the breath rate to intensity of the situation. And you want to use the breath to wave tension out of your body during action. I've used this same sort of strategy through what I call a body scan breath technique, where I'm scanning my body from head to toe, using the breath to really fill in. So for example, I think about breathing in through my nose. I'm bringing the breath into my head, really paying conscious awareness to the crown of my head, to the scalp, to my face, to my eyes, to my nose, to all my structures within my face and head, feeling anywhere I'm holding tension, scanning the breath to find this tension. And then when I exhale, I just think about letting it all go. And I do this sort of breath scan all throughout my body. So I start with my head, move into my shoulders and neck, move into my hands, my arms, my torso, my hips, my legs, lower body, etc. This is a great strategy that you can use in a sort of meditative sort of way. In addition to that, you're taking longer duration breaths here to get back in control with your breath, to be aware of what you're doing, what you're feeling, and is a great way to downregulate your nervous system. So moving into the next philosophy known as tactical breathing. Within this philosophy, we're going to talk about the warriors of today, where the modern military has taken breathwork seriously because when you're under fire, your ability to control your nervous system is literally life or death. Box breathing specifically comes from the Navy SEALs, but there's more to tactical breathing than just one technique. Now you might be asking, why does the military care about breath? Well, the main thing here is because we're going to have a natural sympathetic response, especially when we're under fire. And this is known as the combat stress response, where you have that sympathetic response of tunnel vision, loss of fine motor control, and impaired decision making. This is not where you want to be when you're thinking about life or death. This is all caused by sympathetic overdrive, which is your fight, flight, freeze response going haywire on overdrive. What we've come to realize is breath is the fastest way to shift your autonomic nervous system from fight, flight, freeze, which is sympathetic, to a more downregulated state where you're parasympathetic in the rest, digest, relaxation mode. And if you think about it like this, you can't think your way to calm, but you can definitely breathe your way to calm. Now, the main technique of tactical breathing in itself is a box breathing method where they use a 4-second box methodology. So it's a 4-second inhale, 4-second pause, 4-second exhale, 4-second pause. And this is going to be the cadence, and it creates, again, that box style pattern. So it's been studied that SEAL teams specifically use this technique before missions, during pauses in combat, and for recovery. And Mark Deviney himself, who is a former Navy SEAL and the founder of SEAL Fit, stated that box breathing was the single most important mental skill I learned. There are other renditions of the box breathing technique to include elongated exhales or to integrate hums within the exhale, again, to downregulate the nervous system and integrate organic vagal nerve stimulation. But the main principle in itself is a 4-second box breathing methodology. Another combat tactical breathing technique is something known as the physiological sigh, and this was conducted by Stanford researchers where the technique in itself is a double inhale through the nose. So if you take the full breath in, you're going to find the very ceiling of your breath, hold it for a second, and take one more sip of air is the idea. And then you're going to take a long exhale through the mouth. Again, this was conducted by Stanford researchers to include Dr. Andrew Huberman and his research team, and they came to realize that this was the fastest way to downregulate your nervous system in real time with one cycle of breath, which can shift your state entirely. And it was also found that this naturally occurs during crying and before sleep, and it's the body's built-in natural reset. So now I want to take us into deeper territory where everything we've discussed so far is about performance, recovery, and daily function. But here's another dimension to breathwork: therapeutic and transformational practices that go beyond the physical into the emotional and even spiritual. These are powerful tools, but they require respect, training, and often guidance. Now, the spectrum of breathwork can range anywhere from conscious functional daily practice to therapeutic techniques, all the way to making transformational changes, where as the intensity increases, so does the potential for emotional release. Now, these practices have been found to surface suppressed emotions, memories, and even trauma. And these techniques aren't better or worse, they just serve a different purpose. Now, the two techniques I wanted to cover specifically are holotropic breathwork and rebirthing breathwork. Holotropic breathwork literally means moving toward wholeness and was developed by Dr. Stanislav Grof, who was a Czech psychiatrist back in the 1970s. This technique in itself uses accelerated breathing with evocative music and body work. And the sessions last anywhere between 2 to 3 hours and are done in pairs, where you have one breather and one sitter. So this is a facilitated strategy. Rebirthing breathwork, on the other hand, was found by Leonard Orr in the 1970s. And this technique itself uses conscious, connected circular breathing with no pauses. And the sessions themselves last anywhere between 1 to 2 hours with a trained breathworker. So again, very similar to a holotropic breathwork where you have a breather and a sitter. This is very much that same strategy where it's going to be a facilitated session. And I'm excited to talk more about the rebirthing breathwork itself in the upcoming episodes, where I will be undergoing my first rebirthing breathwork session. So more to follow on that. So I wanted to make a note here and mention that I'm not incorporating any of these methodologies, specifically holotropic or rebirthing breathwork, with my MBT training methodology, as they require trained facilitation and the right context. But they're definitely worth acknowledging as part of the full breathwork spectrum. So here's where all of this comes together for me. What I've built with MBT is a systematic integration of all of these concepts. Really, what I pull from each philosophy from pranayama is the ancient wisdom component, the variety of techniques, and the breath to mind connection. From Vranich's work is the location of motion and range of motion, better understanding how to identify dysfunctional breathing. And these are objective markers that I can see just by the observation of having someone breathing. From McKeown's work, the objective measures of something like a body oxygen level test, nasal breathing protocols, and carbon dioxide training. From James Nestor's work, the science of why. understanding the benefits of nitric oxide and how vital importance nasal breathing is to this molecule, along with the evolutionary perspective of how our breathing and airways have changed over time. From Brulé's work, the 3 convergences model of awareness, relaxation, and integration into energized calm, otherwise known as a state of dynamic peace. From Systema, the 4 pillars of breath, movement, posture, and relaxation, where we have these concepts of breath independence and continuous breathing under stress. Also, the burst breathing methodology, which helps when we're under significant stress or strain. And last, the tactical breathing methodology, where these concepts of boxed breathing, the physiological sigh, and the realization of performance under pressure and how we can downregulate our nervous system through breath, not through how we think. See, MBT is not just one philosophy, it's the synthesis that makes sense for the movement. It's an integrative, collaborative process of all the bodies of work and research that we're able to create and make sense of. And here's what you have to understand. See, breath and movement are not separate things when you train independently. They're synergistic. They flow together. When breath and movement are in sync, performance is optimized. When they're disconnected, you're working against yourself. Think of it like this. Breath is the rhythm where movement is the melody. And when they're in time, it's music. When they're not, it's just noise. Now, let me give you a real world example. Take a sport like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. In BJJ, you have to know timing. You have to know when to move and when to wait. You have to know when and how to create tension, when to grip, when to squeeze, when to bridge. And you have to know when to relax. Conservation of energy. You have to know when to flow with the opponent, and you have to find the openings. And if you're not integrating the breath with all of that, you get gassed out fast. And BJJ itself is a microcosm of breath and movement integration, where the timing of the breath helps you read both you and your opponent's rhythm. The tension helps you exhale, where the brace and tension relationship help you understand when to exert energy and when to load. And the relaxation phase is not about attacking, but is about creating the foundation to breathe and conserve energy. Now, what happens when the breath is disconnected? You're either going to hold your breath under pressure, which is going to increase blood pressure and induce rapid fatigue. You're going to demonstrate shallow chest breathing, which is going to increase carbon dioxide and induce a panic response. You could also get to a point where you're not able to recover at all between exchanges, which is going to create a cumulative oxygen debt. Either way, you're going to get to a point where you're gassed out, where your breath and movement are mismatched. And it's not just because you have quote unquote poor cardio. And this is why, for me, in my Prim8 framework, breath is pattern number 1. Not the squat, not the hinge, not the push or pull, not rotation or sway. It's all integrative, but the foundation and the base comes down to breath because every single movement and pattern depend on it. And within my Prim8 framework, the 8 patterns, again, start with breath, which is the foundation of all movement. The squat, which is a bilateral lower body push, and it helps you understand how to load and fold. The lunge, which is a unilateral body movement. We have to learn how to split stance as well. And it teaches us coordination and proprioception, otherwise known as spatial awareness. The hinge, which is a hip-dominant movement. A lot of people don't know how to do this, surprisingly. And within the clinic, anecdotally, I can say that individuals who don't know how to hinge basically have their hips and their lumbar spine fused together, which is what I found to be indicative of things like low back pain. So hip hinge mechanics, both understanding how to disassociate the hips from the lumbar, but also how to integrate them through coordinated movement through something like a hinge, is going to be such a great value to either yourself or to clients you work with. Pushing and pulling movement, both upper body and lower body, we have to understand how to load, distribute, and produce force. And this is where things like pushing and pulling are going to come into play. Rotation, which is a transverse planar movement. And quite honestly, what I found is people just don't get enough of it. It's either you're walking forward, you're walking backward, you're turning, and then you're continuing to walk forward or backward. So the rotational component is a movement that atrophies significantly because it's just something that we don't get enough of within this modern era of society we live in. And sway is the one that integrates them all together, almost vitally important as breath. More or less, the whole idea is applying these concepts in everyday life. Sway is lateral movement and stability. It's balance, coordination, proprioception. It dictates speed, agility, and reaction time. And it's all indicative off of having the prerequisites of the past 7 movements. If we have dysfunctional breathing, our sway is going to be thrown off. If we don't know how to hinge properly, our rotation is going to be thrown off, and we're not going to have a good reaction time, or we're going to compensate through dysfunctional movement patterns. So sway is vitally important, and it's at the very end of the program because of this. We have to understand these 8 movement archetypes, and in doing that, these are foundational movement principles where if you understand these, you're going to be able to move in any which way or fashion based on off of what you need in life and performance. Another thing to add on to here is that you see all of these different social media influencers come out with these quote unquote new exercises. Really, they're not changing movement because our anatomy is our anatomy. We can't change shoulder flexion any more than what shoulder flexion is. You can maybe come out with a cool different device or some sort, but other than that, it's always going to be the same movement. So that's why I've created this framework, is because it breaks down movement to its most simplistic form, where it doesn't matter what device you have, what implement you're using, what method you use to incorporate these movements. The movements are straight and simple and are based off of our biology, our physiology, and our anatomy. And I want to touch on one last piece here, which is why I put breath first, is you can't squat well if you can't breathe well. You can't hinge safely without proper trunk stability via your diaphragm. You can't recover without down regulation, which again is breath controlled. And like I said earlier, you can't think yourself to calm, but you can breathe yourself to calm. That's the idea here. And that's why before we assess any pattern, we always start with the breath. All right, let's get practical. You've got the science from part 1 and you've got the philosophies from today. So here are 5 things you can do today to transform your breathing. Number 1, nasal breathing during exercises. Start training with your mouth closed, not at a max effort, of course, but you're going to start with your warm up, your cool down, your low intensity work first. And quite honestly, it's going to be uncomfortable at first, but that is your carbon dioxide tolerance building. And if you can get your Bolt score to 25 seconds, you'll notice a real difference and a change in your physiology. You can simply start with walking, light jogging, or mobility work, where the goal is to keep your mouth closed as long as possible during the workouts. Number 2 is box breathing for recovery. Now, you can use box breathing between sets, before bed, or anytime you just need to downregulate. Remember, 4 seconds in, a 4-second hold, 4 seconds out, and a 4-second hold. That's just going to be 4 cycles of that. That is the tactical breathing technique. Again, you can also add a 1.5 seconds onto that. So it's going to be a 5.5 box style breathing technique. Either way, you're going to be able to shift your nervous system into a more downregulated tone where you're in that state of rest and relaxation. Some good use cases here are going to be between heavy sets, before presentations, or even before you go to bed. Number 3 is the physiological sigh. Now, this is a great one. Again, if you need an immediate calm, you're going to use the physiological sigh. Remember, the technique in itself is a double inhale through your nose, where you're going to have 1 full breath and then 1 more quick sip of air, and then a long exhale through your mouth, long open mouth exhale. Only 1 cycle is all it takes, and you're going to be able to downregulate your nervous system. Literally, it's the fastest way to shift your state in real time. So some good use cases here. You could be using this during a mid-argument, maybe a pre-presentation downregulator, or even a post-stress event. So you just finished things, everything's gone haywire, you're like, oh my gosh, where am I? Try this technique out and see how it just helps downregulate you and helps get your body back in sync. Takeaway number 4 is humming. I'm a big fan of this one, as humming is going to increase nitric oxide activity by 15-fold. It stimulates your vagus nerve because the vocal cords vibrating against your vagus nerve are going to be essentially organic vagal nerve stimulation, and it ventilates your sinuses. Humming in the shower, for example, or humming on your commute, it works, and there's research to prove it. And from a meditation standpoint, this is why Om chanting has been used for thousands of years. And takeaway number 5, track your Bolt score. If you took your Bolt score after part 1, keep tracking it. Every week, same time, same conditions, and watch it climb. If you're under 20 seconds, continue to do the work and work up to your goal of 40 seconds, where I promise you every 5-second improvement, you're going to notice a difference in how you feel. Make sure each time you test this, it's going to be under the same conditions. You want to track your progress over time, which is going to be measurable. And if you haven't already, check out my free school community. In there, I have a post where people are posting their Bolt scores. This is just a great way for us to engage and for you to have ownership of where you're at in your journey. So let's bring this whole series together. In part 1, we established the problem where 91% of athletes, and really most of us, are breathing dysfunctionally. We understand that we lose our natural breathing around age 5 and that your diaphragm is the pneumatic hub of your body. We know that nasal breathing produces nitric oxide, and carbon dioxide tolerance is the real key. And the vagus nerve is why all these techniques work. Today in part 2, we covered the solutions from 5,000-year-old pranayama practices to Navy SEAL tactical breathing, from Vranich's horizontal breathing to Systema's 4 pillars and 5 core principles, from functional breathwork to therapeutic modalities like holotropic and rebirthing breathwork. And we covered how MBT integrates all of this and why breath is pattern number 1 in my Prim8 framework. So if this series resonated with you, I highly encourage you to come join us in the free MBT community on School, where we go deeper on topics like this. I share breathing drills and progressions, and you can ask questions directly. And when you do end up joining the community, be sure to drop your Bolt score in there and share which philosophies resonate with you the most. The link's going to be in the show notes, and you can find it at school.com/movement-based therapy. And stay tuned, as I'll be heading up to Portland in the coming weeks to do my first Rebirthing Breathwork session, where I'll be sharing that experience with the community. Remember, breath as medicine goes deeper than just performance. And with this, I'm excited to explore it and bring you along for the journey. So that's it for the Breath Blueprint series. Remember, your body is capable of more than you think. You knew how to breathe perfectly once. Now you have the tools to remember. So honor your body, restore the flow, and I'll see you in the next one.